Hey, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we'll take a look at the install process for Nuxt JS with Tailwind CSS version 2. Now, if you're new to the channel, I post up tutorials, tips, and tricks for web development, especially for developers that are just getting started. So if that's the sort of content you're interested in, please do hit the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. A couple things you should know before we start. You should have Node and npm installed. I'll be using VS Code as my code editor. And if you're on a Mac and you need help with your web development environment, I have a tutorial series on my channel to help you set up your Mac for web development, focusing on the terminal, Node, Git, VS Code, and much more. You can check the video out in the top right corner over here, and I'll post it in the description down below. And you should know a little bit about Nuxt. Nuxt is a views framework. Now, I would say the major feature that got it popular was the SSR, server-side rendering. This allows single-page applications to get rendered on the server side before it gets rendered on the client. Now, that doesn't sound like a big deal. SPAs are not SEO friendly. They were primarily used for web applications and not for standard websites. But now with SSR, that's not really an issue. We can use it as like a Jamstack or a static site generator. I'll go through more Nuxt features as we go. Now let's go over here and click the Get Started button. We can install Nuxt using Yarn, npx, or npm. I'm going to go the npx route here. Let's go over to terminal. I'm in my project folder. Let's go npx, create Nuxt app. I'm going to name it tw2-nuxt. Going to ask us some questions here. I'm going to name it that. I'm going to use JavaScript, npm for package manager, Tailwind CSS, because that's what this video is about. I'm not going to do this because I think it's going to increase the install time. None of that. No testing. I'm going to use universal SSR. Let's do static. We'll turn that on. And yeah, yes. That's installed. Let's go into TW, cd into that. I'm going to open up VS Code. Okay, let's serve it up. Up terminal, do npm run dev. And let's take a look at the package here while that's setting up. And we have these scripts here for dev, build, start, and generate. Nuxt also installed this dev dependency here for Tailwind CSS, and this is Nuxt's official Tailwind CSS module for setting up Tailwind with Nuxt. Over here, here's Nuxt. This is the default application here. I'm gonna cancel out of that, and we'll close this for now. This is the Tailwind CSS Nuxt module, and this will show us how to set up Tailwind CSS with Nuxt. We've already done this because in our install process, we configured it to use Tailwind CSS. What we need to do now is, right now it's running Tailwind CSS version 1, and we need to install version 2. And Nuxt doesn't use post CSS 8. So we'll have to go ahead and install the compatibility build within Tailwind CSS. This is for people that have installed it normally and figured out that they didn't have post CSS 8. We can start at this step here. I'll grab that. I'll do npm install -d. I'll grab this. I'm going to install it as a dev dependency. And I'm also going to install a couple other things. I'm going to install Sass loader, and Tailwind CSS forms. Let's take a look here. Now we have Tailwind CSS, the compatibility build, installed Sass and the Sass loader. These two, post CSS, auto prefixer, Tailwind CSS forms. And if you want to learn more about Tailwind CSS forms, I have a video on my channel. I'll post it up over here. You can click it on the top right here. And we have the Nuxt Tailwind module. Let's go over here and create the Tailwind config file. So we use npx CLI latest. We do init. This will create our Tailwind CSS config file. It looks for the Tailwind CSS Nuxt module, looks for our CSS file in assets, CSS, and they name it Tailwind CSS. Sure. So over here, looks for the source CSS file here, assets, CSS, Tailwind CSS, and it looks for this Tailwind config file. So pretty standard on how it's normally set up on other frameworks. Okay, let's take a look here. And this is a documentation on how to install. They use Yarn here, but we used npm instead. Yeah, that's pretty much it here. Let's look options here. And you can find this site at tailwindcss.nuxtjs.org. And I'll post this in the description down below as well. Let's go and create our source CSS file. And that's it. That should work. Take a look at our config. Tailwind config. So this is the recommended Tailwind config here. I'm going to grab this. I don't want to type all that out. Put this in the purge. Here, I'll add mode. And this looks for all the views, layouts, pages, plugins, Nuxt config, and here's some TypeScript stuff. This may not all apply, but good to have it in there. You may, if you're using it as a static site generator, you may look for Markdown for MD. And you can add that to here if you want. In dark mode, leave that as is. Some other stuff I want to add. We can do, let's do colors. We'll add, this is the extended palette. You can extend it by doing colors. I'm going to add emerald. Spelled it right. I'm going to override gray with one of the new color palettes, True Gray. So this is going to be a new color palette, and this is overriding with one of the new color palettes. And I'm going to add a plugin here. It's going to be require at Tailwind CSS forms. And this is the Tailwind CSS form plugin. And I think that's what I wanted to do in here. And there's no post CSS unless you wanted to add your own post CSS plugins. But for our purpose, we're not going to be doing that. Hopefully there's no errors here. We'll figure it out if it'll tell us if there is. Now let's take a look. Let's go to pages, go to index. And here, let's get rid of a bunch of this stuff. This CSS can't have more than one element. Can't have it like that. It has to be contained within one. So let's call this wrapper. And here it gives us a comment where we can use the add apply. That's good. I'm going to do that. Grab this. And in here, we'll do div.card one.type. I'll do span.text emerald 100. I'll do Nuxt. Yes. And p tail CSS v2. Oh, that. Let's serve it up. And let's do npm run dev. And as that's going, let's take a look at the Nuxt config. This module is added here, if you were wondering how it gets added to the Nuxt. So you go to the Nuxt config, and there's some configurations here that you can change. All right, let's take a look at what we have. And we have here And let's add some other stuff. We can do here lang equals CSS, and this is the Sass and the Sass loader we installed with npm. We'll scope it to this view, and let's go and add card. We'll also add title. What happened here? Didn't like that. Yeah, let's do add apply. We'll do text 6XL. Want bold. Let's go ahead and do add apply 10. Rounded large text emerald 500. BG emerald 100. We'll do shadow large. Save that. And there we go. We got our Nuxt JS Tailwind CSS version 2 set up and installed. And that's pretty easy to set up Nuxt with set up Tailwind CSS with Nuxt. And that I think that's probably because there's an official Tailwind CSS module for Nuxt. And if we go over here to the GitHub, it's maintained by Sebastian, and he is the creator of Nuxt. We can assume that this module, unless something happens to Tailwind and he doesn't support it anymore, but he's maintaining, and there's contributors here as well that is maintaining this. So it should be pretty up to date with what's going on. They added something, I think, recently, maybe even a couple days ago. Go type in Tailwind. So this will give you all of your colors that you're using within your Tailwind CSS build. And you saw that I added the emerald, and I guess I also replaced the gray. I can't really tell. I think normally the gray is a little bit bluer than this. So I'm assuming this is the true gray. And you can click on any of these colors and copy it to your clipboard. Yeah, I don't know how useful this is, but it's something fun that they added to it. Okay, so let's go back. I want to go ahead and create a couple of components and pages just to show how easy Nuxt is. Let's go ahead and create some pages. We can right click and create a new file here. I'll do an about.view. Copy this. Let's change this to about. Let's create another file called login. I'm going to copy and paste the markup for the login page. If you want to know how I created it, I have a Tailwind Forms plugin video. I'll post it in the top right corner over here if you guys want to take a look at it. Now let's go ahead and create a component. And it's very easy to create this stuff with Nuxt. I can go ahead and let's delete this. I'm going to create a file called app.bar. Let's quickly create something here, and I'll do nav div.logo. I'll do another div. And here I'm going to do, we can use this Nuxt link to tools class button and duplicate this, login, about, login. Okay, so we have a navigation here. Let's go and create some styles for this. Now I'll do a nav, add apply. I'm going to do flex, justify center, items center, y2. Actually, this is center. The x10, text width full, g white, do shadow large logo. Adding 4, font bold. I'll do button B, x4, y2, x gray, 500, rounded. I'll do hover. And with Tailwind CSS 2, you can use these pseudo classes now with hover. You don't have to go and create a hover like btn:hover as another, add it right to the apply now. Emerald 100, another hover. Just like when you add them as classes within your markup. 700. And I'll do here. And this is a special class. This is Nuxt link exact active. And this will give us the active link. I'll do bg emerald 100 x 700. Hopefully that's all good. Look here, and I can apply this to add it to this layout here. And this is the default layout. The only thing I want here is I want BG gray 100. And I'm going to add it here. App bar. Let's save that. Okay, so here's my page. Not what I wanted. Class here. This needs. All right, so we have that. And about. And our login page. And this is using the Tailwind CSS Forms plugin. And here's an about page. Here's our home page. Now look how easy that is to create components. Like we created this app bar component. We don't have to go ahead and we don't have to add it here. It just knows that it's there. And this is a new feature within Nuxt. It wasn't always like this. You would have to go into and add it. Have to go in, add it to here within your script before, but now it just automatically brings it in if you set your Nuxt config here. Auto import components equal to true. Nuxt also auto generates our view routing for us based on our page components. If you're using state management, the view store is greatly simplified as well with the Vuex. Nuxt definitely simplifies building view apps, allows us to focus more on the development. I wouldn't jump right into Nuxt. Definitely learn JavaScript first, then views, then Nuxt. Would be like learning Tailwind before you know CSS. You gotta know your foundation before you get into the frameworks. Let's take a look at the build process here. We can cancel out of this. I think it's npm run generate. We can take a look at npm package. So there's a couple of scripts here. Dev is what we've been using. Build is builds it, and I think it puts it into this .next folder. And start does what dev does, but uses the build files. And generate actually builds out a distribution folder. Okay, so that's done. Let's take a look. The file is, there's no CSS file. It's just they embedded it into the HTML, so there's no render blocking from the CSS. So it makes it faster. Now let's go and do a serve dist. Opens it up. It's the same. Here we have our localhost 3000 that we had before, and we have our 5000. And let's go to about. We have our login. Small thing I noticed, these aren't hovering or they're not active when you're on the right page. So let's go take a look. In the app bar, the link is named wrong. I put ling instead of link. If I save that, that should highlight now. And if I go to about, that should be there. And those are not highlighted now when I'm on the home. Let's do a quick recap here. We installed Nuxt JS through npx using create Nuxt app. When we were setting up the app, we specified that we wanted to use Tailwind CSS, and it installed the official Nuxt Tailwind module. The Nuxt Tailwind module uses post CSS 7, and it installed Tailwind CSS version 1. We needed to go ahead and install Tailwind CSS using the compatibility build over here. the compatibility build. And we installed this. We also installed Sass and the Sass loader, and we installed Tailwind CSS forms for our login page. So we're able to use Sass within our pages here, within our plugins, using the Lang CSS, and we use the Tailwind CSS forms plugin within our config. So that's pretty much it for setting up Nuxt JS and Tailwind CSS. If you guys have any comments, any questions, let me know. Let me know if you want to learn more about Nuxt in general. Yeah, just comment down below and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Hey, if you've gotten this far, thanks for the support. This will help the channel grow. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to click the thumbs up button and leave a comment down below. To stay updated with the latest content from the channel, you can subscribe by clicking right here in the middle.